Testing 1 2 3 4. Test 1 2 3 4 5.
Audio is good.
Testing the YouTube audio. 1 2 3 4 5 6.
Okay, it's 9 o'clock. We'll call this meeting to order. Welcome everybody to the I'm getting ahead of myself, May 20th meeting of the Pima County Elections Integrity Commission. If you would all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to be led by Commissioner Mace this morning.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call. Commissioner Atkins.
I'm here.
Commissioner DeLarge. Commissioner Mace.
Present.
Commissioner Hurley. Commissioner Tellman.
Here.
Commissioner White. Commissioner Kirshen.
Here.
Commissioner Preble.
Present.
And Commissioner Bickle is present as well. Call to the public. Do we have anybody that wants to address the commission in the public realm? Online, I don't see anybody in person. Okay. Meeting summary from last month was distributed earlier this week. Does anybody have any additions, deletions, or corrections?
Nope.
Hearing none, the meeting summary will stand approved as read. Agenda item A, 5A, update on election laws from the legislative session, a possible special session in the lawsuit filed with Superior Court, Yavapai County, was to be done by Michael Rassi. I do not see him either in person or on the screen. If he does show up, we will get back to him. Agenda item 5B, security plan update. Put here at the request of Commissioner Hurley, but Ms. Hargrove?
Here he is.
Oh. Okay. We have Commissioner White and Commissioner Hurley.
Parking was not coordinated.
I thought it might not be, which is why I went to the public parking garage. Security plan update, Commissioner Hurley.
Present.
No, I know you're here. We're into the agenda. Your first item, security plan update.
Oh, I'd just like to hear from the people talking about the security plan. We asked about this last time, and I think we'd like to have another update.
Ms. Hargrave?
With all the new technology, microphone. Sorry. With all the new technology and all, I would think there would be considerable needs to update the security plan accordingly. And as I recall, I'm actually going back about 3 years ago, we had a considerable review of the security plan. So I would think that's a little bit overdue.
Ms. Hargrave?
Yes, excuse me, I can respond to that. So the security plan, I am meeting with ITD on Monday, the 23rd, to discuss not only cybersecurity, but physical security of not just the vote centers and the poll books, but also the office. So we are going to review the entire plan and update it appropriately at that time.
When will the commission get the chance to look at it?
So there will be a public version that we can distribute to the commission. Of course, there is a version that is not public that we will not distribute to the commission. So we will review that on Monday, so I'm thinking we would need a couple of weeks to actually finalize everything.
So it's a reasonable expectation that we'd have it prior to the next meeting?
Yes, absolutely, prior to June 17th, yes.
Okay. Elections Department plan for vote centers and e-poll books. Ms. Hargrove, or you can defer to Mr. Wisely if you would prefer.
I can do part of it. So I gave you guys kind of a high overview of the implementation plan. Of course, I got here in April, so I can't backtrack to the beginning. There was not an implementation plan provided by the vendor. I spoke with the vendor, and I've asked for an implementation plan, or at least a projected implementation plan from them. There was not one provided, so they do not have one. So we are in the process of working through what we need to do. There are critical points that we need to address. Of course, the electronic poll books and any equipment that we need to actually run the election, those are critical pieces. And we have received all of the electronic poll books. We do not have the ballot-on-demand printers. Those printers have been promised to us June and I actually gave you, talking off the top of my head, a sheet with some dates on it. It's a two-sided document, and so, excuse me, there's dates when we anticipate receiving the printers. June 27th, we anticipate receiving 156 of the ballot-on-demand printers, which will allow us to have at least one in each vote center. And of course, more than that, when the rest are due the second week of July, and then we can distribute those to the vote centers as necessary.
That's going to be within the early voting period.
Yes, but they're not using our printers. They have their own printers. The recorder's office runs they have their own ballot-on-demand printers. These are only for Election Day.
Do you have at least a prototype example ballot-on-demand printer so we can do some testing now?
So the printer should arrive on next week. We will get one to test on next week.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, so we will get one to test on next week. We will be able to test them prior to the election. However, there is a contingency plan in place in the event that the printers, if they didn't arrive at all, or if for some reason something happens to the printers, we do have a contingency plan in place where we will actually use paper ballots, issue paper ballots. So I will order paper ballots for the vote centers as well. All of the cradle points have been received, and they will be tested. I will defer to Mr. Wisely on that. And the Precinct Central is the software that we use to actually coordinate and monitor the elections and the equipment. We work on that in conjunction with the Recorder's Office. So basically, we are responsible for the hardware. The actual program of the precinct list is the recorder's responsibility. So we receive it, but we do not maintain it. So what we will be using on Election Day is a copy of their voter file. We will not alter that at all. So they are responsible for working with 10X, the vendor, to make sure that the workflow process that we need to use is in place. So we're working with the recorder on that and the vendor. Staff training, we will have intensive training June 20th through the 22nd from the actual vendor. So the vendor will come in and train us on from A to Z. I was under the impression that some of the training had already occurred, but it had not. So I've scheduled that training. They're going to come in and train us, trainer, so that we can train poll workers as well, and all of the other technology that we need, and then, of course, poll worker training. That's ongoing. We're working on that, updating documents, looking at processes, going through test elections and mock elections to make sure that we have our workflow straight. And I'm going to turn the cradle point over to Mr. Wisely.
I'm sorry, but I hate to interrupt.
Sure.
But I need to drill down a little bit on your statement that you're going to order paper ballots for the vote centers as a backup. Under a vote center concept in Arizona, any voter from any location in the county can go to any vote center and cast a ballot. So how many ballots are you going to order for each precinct ballot style? Fed only, Spanish language, if that's applicable. I mean, it seems to me that's going to be exceedingly expensive. Have you worked through how many paper ballots you're going to order for each vote center? And then have you contacted the printer to see if they have paper to support that? Because my understanding is that paper is critically short right now, and it may be the case that they do not have the paper.
Yes, so overall, it will be 15% of the balance of the voters who are not on the PEVL and the ABLE. So 15% of the ballots for each precinct. Of course, federal only will be less than that, and any city elections will be less than that. But we're going to order 15% and allocate those to the vote centers. The vendor has stated that there is no problem with what we need to order, and that information is actually going out to the vendor this week on what we need.
Commissioner Preble.
I think it is a prudent idea to have the paper ballots in place because, as I understand, if I check in at the e-poll book, I'm done. I have to stay there. I can either vote provisional or you can hand me a paper ballot, and I think that that is probably the more correct thing to do.
I have no concern about having paper ballots as a backup contingency plan. My concern is how do you allocate those out to the various vote centers? Because we have no idea about how many voters are going to show up at Vote Center 1 versus Vote Center 129.
Yes, sir, you're absolutely correct. So what I am doing, have a list of all of the vote centers and the precincts that are surrounding that vote center, and using a percentage of that and adding a percentage if it's in a area that has a large company or the downtown area or university, then I'm increasing the percentage that I would send to that actual vote center. So it's based on precinct numbers, but an additional percentage depending on where that vote center is actually located.
Okay, what you've just said does not support vote centers
Bingo.
because it's not the precincts that are around the location of a vote center. It's any precinct in the county. So what you just described would cause a situation where a voter would show up at a vote center, but there would be no ballot there for them to vote on, because they were from the other side of the county, or Green Valley versus Oro Valley, or whatever. So that's my concern. I just don't hear any of your comments supporting that has been well thought through.
I think you misunderstood my statement. I am sending all of the ballots to all of the vote centers, but the allocation is based on a number that could possibly show up. If they were precincts in that area, that's the base. And then it increases depending on where that vote center may be.
Then will you have additional ballots, so if they
Microphone.
run out, somebody can run over and bring
Microphone,
some
Barbara.
more?
Barbara, microphone.
Will you have additional ballots so that if they run out at one place, you can have some more brought in?
That is correct. I will not deploy all of the ballots. We will hold some back and deploy them if needed. And of course, this is a backup. So it is not the primary way that we're going to issue ballots.
If I may, I think Commissioner White raises an excellent point. As a 30-year systems engineer, one of the things I learned to do is look at the unintended consequences of system changes. And what happens? We don't operate in a vacuum. When you push over here on the left, something pops out over here on the right. You said one word that really bothered me. That was the possible allocation. We have no history here. We have no history of what is going to happen out there with these vote centers. As Commissioner White says, this actually makes the case for the precinct votings because we have history there. We know who shows up at the precincts. We know how to allocate to the precincts. You're kind of making the argument to go back to precinct voting. I'm sorry, that's just the way I hear it.
Is that a question, or were you just making a statement?
Well, it's probably a statement. I guess the question is, how do you respond to that? I guess,
Okay. Well, first of all, when I got here in April, it was too late to go back to precinct voting. So there isn't an option to go back to precinct voting at this point. We cannot find enough locations. I've actually asked my staff to take a look and contact facilities, and what we face is with a vote center, we don't have to worry about precinct boundaries. With a precinct, we have to make sure that the polling place is within that precinct boundary. And finding enough of those right now is not possible. That should have been started beginning of the year, end of last year. That's not going to happen for this election.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. First of all, Ms. Hargrove, first of all, welcome to Tucson, and welcome to the show here. Secondly, let me make clear, I don't hold you responsible for anything that happened prior to you getting here. So the comments about this. What you are saying about it being too late is extremely troubling. We have talked about this at this commission. We have asked for the drop dead dates. when you have to go back to doing whatever. We've been told those drop dates are in the future. And now you're telling us we're past that. I just don't know what to say. You know, we've been misled, maybe not by you, you weren't here. But now we're finding out, nope, we've gone down, we're Cortez, and we've burnt the ships in the harbor.
It's possible they didn't understand the totality of the question.
No kidding.
That, you know, they're different go, no-go dates, right? So going back to a precinct-based voting has passed. So we can't have that conversation anymore.
What else would a go, no date be? You know, there's no project plan on this thing. I'm sorry, this is not a project plan. This is a to-do list. There should have been a project plan with a timeline, resource allocated, built in with deadlines, milestones, shifted, that kind of stuff. That should have been done a year ago, okay? That should have been done a year ago, and we are here with a checklist.
I agree, and my first statement earlier before you got here was that there was not an implementation plan in place. So the only thing I could do is pick up where we are and move forward and make sure that we address everything that needs to be addressed now and going forward.
Commissioner Tillman.
When will the commissioners have an opportunity to have a demonstration?
That's a great question. So a couple of opportunities, really. The Board of Supervisors has asked for a demo on June 7th, and we are planning to have a larger demo for the EIC and the public at your next meeting in June 17th. So that is already in the plans.
Good.
Why can't we be part of the June 7th demonstration? That would be a smaller audience, and rather than going on with the public, which would be a larger audience, and with the Board of Supervisors, you know, that's who we work for.
Oh, absolutely. That's open to the public. It's
June
just
7th?
Yes, it's at the board meeting on the 7th. It's open to the public. It's just a smaller space in here, so we can't get as much equipment in here, so it'll be a small demo.
Will there be opportunities for some of the elections volunteers, workers, whatever, to have hands-on with this equipment?
Are you referring to the poll workers?
The people that are going to be working these vote centers, the volunteers, they're going to be using this equipment. Will they have an opportunity to have a hands-on opportunity at these demonstrations?
If they want to participate at the demonstrations, but they will have intensive training.
It's fine.
On the equipment.
That's fine.
Yes, they can participate in any demonstration they want to, yes.
So who do we contact for that training?
For the training?
Yeah, to participate, like you said they needed to have the training to participate. Who do we contact?
No. They will be trained on all of the equipment before they work.
Right.
But they can come to any of the demonstrations and participate.
Perhaps you misunderstood. Can they participate hands-on in the demonstrations?
You mean, are we going to use them as the poll workers in the demonstrations?
Sure. All right.
Is that the question?
I think it is, yes.
Okay. We had not planned on that, no.
Why not?
I'd like to provide a little bit of input here. It's a public demonstration of a product that's going to occur. It's not a training session. And it's something, it's kind of like if you're getting ready to market a bicycle, somebody's going to ride the bicycle around, but not everybody in the room is going to get trained on how to ride the bicycle.
Right.
They're going to have an opportunity to get trained on the equipment before they're put in a position where they actually have to use it on election day. That's where the poll workers and the volunteers and all of the people besides the general public, I don't see any reason why John Doe needs to have hands-on with how the e-poll book's going to work and how the ballot-on-demand printer is going to work, since he's never going to use the e-poll book in that capacity or the ballot-on-demand printer. I would say there's a difference between a demonstration and a training session, and what we're looking at on June 7th and 17th are demonstrations, not training sessions.
All right, perhaps, okay, I'm not talking about John Doe, first of all. There's a process in the systems world, the IT world, called user acceptance testing. That's towards the end of the project, before it's deployed, and the customer, which I believe in this case would be the people working the systems. Actually, the customer is the voter, obviously, but the intermediary is the poll worker. Those are the users. They'll be using the systems. And in my world, I come from those users, a small subset of them are brought in, run through the drills to provide input, training, that kind of thing. It's user acceptance testing. That's what I'm talking about here. It's not a demonstration. This is a real, get your hands on this sucker, run this sucker through there. It may take a day or two or whatever, but that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, a detailed use where real users put their hands on there and try to break it, frankly, kind of thing. But make sure it works so that they can do this. They know how to do this when they're deployed out there. They know how to deal with contingencies. Printer breaks down. What do they do? That kind of thing. That's what I'm talking about. It's not a 20-minute demo.
If I might add, one of the benefits of having what Mr. Hurley is talking about is that the trainers, Mr. Federico or anyone else that's going to be involved in training, learns what they need to train people on. What kind of mistakes do people make? Is the documentation correct? Are all of the issues addressed? So it is really important to have that person that's unfamiliar with come in and try to do everything that they're going to do on election day with those components.
Commissioner Preble.
Thank you. As I understand, it's required by law for everybody to go in for their training. I think it's 2 weeks before the election. And I am certain that the trainers that have been trained will also stay after in class. And if anybody wants to come forward and, because it's intimidating to maybe perhaps some people who are not computer savvy and are fearful of it, I'm sure that they'll do a little bit of hands-on until everybody is comfortable, and I'm sure. And the other point I'm saying is, as I understand, we're going to be using the voter ID slip in the vote center, and it will be passed down. So in the demonstration June 7th, I want the border supervisor to go through all the scenarios of how it's going to work, because we never turn a voter away. Nobody. I never want to save those words. I'm sorry, you can't vote today. We'll vote you provisional. We'll do whatever to get you in and out the door. But in the demonstration June 7th, I think we should go through all the scenarios.
I agree with everything that has been said. So we will not bring poll workers in, number one, for the acceptance testing. However, the staff and other volunteers who are temporary workers are currently going through mock elections, going through training, meeting, discussing what worked, what didn't work, what was confusing, what they did not understand. That's an ongoing process. So we're doing that continuously. So that part we'll take care of. As far as what Mrs. Preble said, yes, we will have the regular training, the training that explains to them what's new and what's not, what has changed and what hasn't changed. And the only thing that really has changed is that poll list, the precinct register, is on an iPad now. That has changed. The process has not really changed. They're still signing that list. It's on an iPad. They're still receiving a ballot. The ballot will print as they're checked in. That has not changed. The voter ID slip will be modified slightly because we won't need part of it. It will be used for provisional ballots, so that part will stay, but we will modify that slip. Okay. What the voters will receive is a little card that tells them which ballot they should receive and vote. So that's what they will receive on Election Day.
Mr. Chairman, just one last point.
Commissioner Tillman.
I would suggest also that you
Microphone.
have at least
Microphone, Barbara.
Microphone,
Is this on?
Maybe you could get closer.
I suggest that you also have a time when you can invite the party observers who will be there so that they know what to watch for and they don't start criticizing because they don't understand. So you might have a couple of those kinds of sessions.
Yes, I agree. And because we're going to try to have a larger space for your meeting on the 17th, I was hoping that we could send invitations out to the parties and to others, actually publish it so the voters, the public, anybody could come and see the demonstration. So that is the plan.
Okay.
Commissioner Hurley.
So just one final point, just for the record, I still object to not bringing in real workers in to exercise the equipment. I think in my considerable experience, you learn a lot from those people, and you're asking for trouble not doing it.
Anything else? Okay. Next item on the agenda, 5.
We didn't go back to the cradle points?
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Wisely, Cradle Points.
Okay, we have activated 25 of the cradle points. Those are the ones with dual SIMs, so we can test both vendors, Verizon and FirstNet. The vendors have reached out to say that they want to participate in our field tests. So we've delayed the start of some of that so that ITD, the recorders, the elections office, and the vendors can monitor each system and see as they come online and off. We've got about 6 different routes we'll take with teams of 2 to go out and test the equipment at remote locations to identify what we need to do. Currently, with what we've done so far, the cradle points are actually very good devices, and I don't anticipate at this point any problems at the remote locations, especially since the vendors will participate in this exercise and be able to make immediate corrections or solutions if there are any problems.
Have you taken the cradle points out to any of the remote vote centers to find out whether there's issues that you can identify already?
I had intended to do that prior to today, but I have got caught up doing some other things, so we haven't done it yet. I was going to put a team out this morning, but I'm here instead. So Monday, a representative from Pima ITD is having a meeting with the vendors to see what their criteria is on, if I give them a schedule, how much advance warning do they need so that they can fully participate. Once I have that information, I will reschedule these advanced tests, but starting Monday, I will do my original test of the equipment at these remote locations so that ITD, recorder, and I can monitor on the systems that are available to us. And then we will bring the vendors in as we can. So we may have to repeat these tests.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Mace.
Question for Mr. Wisely. District 3 obviously has quite a bit of remote area. So this is something that really perks my interest. Would it be possible, I understand that some of the testing may have to be pushed back or you haven't clearly identified what locations, but when that information does become available, would that be possible to be made to the IC? My goal here is that I would really like to see, with District 3 having a pretty large remote population, I would really like to see some equal representation. So if one of us has a metro district, maybe we do one test in metro, but if we have 8 remote locations, I'd like to see a little heavier emphasis on that. Is that at all in your plans?
Yes, it is. And at the end of our test, we can provide some information. I would not like to give anything prior to that.
Yeah, and certainly understood. I just would like an assurance of some sort that, you know, this is definitely an area of concern is, you know, maybe for lack of a better word, just because District 3 does have a lot of those remote areas, and a secondary connection is, you know, going to be critical, as, you know, I don't have to tell you things go wrong. So, so thank you.
Commissioner White?
Mr. Wisely, a couple of questions. I don't have a full understanding of how Cradle Point works, what the communication links are. I've never seen any kind of a functional flow diagram for those links. But I assume that you take the Cradle Point to a remote location or to a vote center proposed location and see whether or not it has cell phone linkage capability at that point. An analog to that with my cell phone I have in my pocket, I would be able to see so many bars or those kind of things to see the strength of the signal. But as I understand it, this system communicates through the cellular telephone system back to another system located, I don't know whether it's at the elections department or in a recorder's office or somewhere, where it has a server type of system that keeps track of who has voted, making sure that nobody can vote twice, all of those kinds of things. Do you anticipate having that complete link as a part of your testing, or are you just going to test to make sure you have the first part, the cell phone connection?
So the equipment I'm planning on sending will be the Cradle Point device, 2 iPads, the thermal printers, and a few other pieces of equipment. What the team will do when they get there, they'll plug all the equipment in and turn them on.
All the equipment includes some type of a server or something that has a centralized database?
At the remote location, it's the Cradle Point and the iPads. We'll just speak of those. The server, of course, is not at the remote location, and it is always on.
Do you have that now in place?
Correct.
And that will be linked?
Yes. And so what we would do is, because I don't want to work with particular data, what they will do when they get to their remote location after turning the equipment on is they will delete the database that is currently on the iPad, the training version of the software, and they'll reinstall it. That'll show that they can reach the server and communicate and transfer data.
I think you were just discussing what's going to happen on election day with the election board at the vote center. Is that correct?
So that will be a similar process, so that we know it communicates effectively and functions at the level we need it to.
If I may interject, the plan is to look at, and if you look at the sheet, it's called Precinct Central. So Precinct Central is where we can monitor the devices, the Cradle Points, the iPads, and voters as they vote. So we can monitor that. So the plan is to make sure that that happens while they're out testing. So ideally, we want to have them in more than one place, more than one location at a time, and everyone working at the same time. The test would be to check in individuals in, of course, try to check in the same individuals, which would be, our test in the field, and then monitor that on our end. So, Mr. White, the server is actually in the clouds, but we log into the Precinct Central and monitor from our offices.
All right, and is that a function of both the Elections Department and the recorder?
Correct.
Throughout the process?
Yes.
It will be.
Okay.
And in addition to Precinct Central, Cradle Point also has a dashboard where you can monitor signal strength and the device coming online. So we will have not only the Precinct Central dashboard up to check connectivity, we will have the Cradle Point dashboard up, and with the eventual addition of the vendors participating, they will have their own systems where they can view what's going on with signal strength and connectivity.
All right, based on what I've heard, I'm going to make a recommendation to the administrator who I represent here that we spend a little bit more money and put a white hat hacker as a part of this test to see if once the system is connected, it can be hacked by professional experts that know how to do that, because I know that's a tremendous public concern about any time you do anything over a telephone or through the internet with regard to elections. So I would just like to have a part of the demonstration of the functionality of this system and the security of it to be able to say that we had a test, we tried to hack it, it is secure.
We can set that up with at any location, so we can do that in the office or
All right, well,
when we're doing
I
that.
don't,
But
I don't know
would
that
be,
the administrator will go along with me, but I am going to make that recommendation. Thank you.
we would, and of course, need IT buy-in.
Commissioner Hurley.
First of all, I think that's an excellent suggestion of a white hat hacker, but I think it might, I don't have a lot of experience in that, but I think you would really want that hacker to come from an unknown location. You want them to go out and just try to do whatever they can do, wherever they can do it, kind of thing. I would think, I don't know, it's not my expertise, I don't know. But let me go back to a couple of questions. You were talking about updating the iPads, and something caught me here. The iPads that are out at these locations are going to be either ahead of the, how far ahead of the use? A day, 2 days, a week?
Within a week.
But I heard you say something about updating them at the locations. Did I hear that correctly?
Are you referring to the test or during the election?
Getting ready for the election. There's some kind of update you have to do to remove training software or something that you have to do prior to the election?
Correct. They're in training mode at the moment.
How do you do that update? Do you take a thumb drive out there and plug it into them, or how's that done?
No, it's similar to how we do it through the Cradle Point.
Which is connected?
And currently they have a training version of the software in it right now so you can do your test without affecting your real election. So what you simply do is you delete the current working database on it and you reinstall a new database.
I find that a little concerning, I guess, because we really don't know what's on there and how they're doing it. It's just
Commissioner Hurley.
Yes.
I think part of what he's trying to say, or at least what I'm understanding, is you've got training software loaded on the iPad right now. When it's set up in the election location, that software will be deleted and reloaded. And part of the process is to make sure that the system actually is going to work the way it's supposed to work on election day. If you can't delete the training software and put the operational software on it, the proverbial stuff has hit the fan and it's time to come up with a solution to a problem that you've identified. I would assume right now, most of the stuff the way we used to do things is taken to the was taken to the polling locations at least the day before, if not 2 days before Election Day, and I would assume that same pattern would continue going forward, so that there's optimal time to remove the training software, verify the functionality of the e-poll book at the actual location where it's going to function, and if it doesn't function, fix it.
Actually, I agree. I agree with that to a point. You have to update. My concern is when you say delete. If I delete something off my hard drive of my computer, it's still there. Okay, it's still there.
Yeah.
And so how do you go through a process of determining, certifying that everything was deleted? You've started with a blank sheet of firmware, whatever there, and there is no residual stuff left over from that training thing, and you're starting with a brand new slate.
Yes, I think we're conflating a couple of things. What Mr. Wisely was referring to was all testing. So when he said that when they go out to the location and they delete what's on there and download it again, that's the test. That will not happen on Election Day. Everything is on the iPad when we send it out for Election Day. So all of the information will come back. All of the iPads will be wiped, taken out of training mode, and put into production mode. The recorder and the elections office will work together to make sure that we verify that any information that because the recorder's office will upload the information with the actual vendor, and then we test it. So that's how that's going to work. So no one will be deleting anything on Election Day. So
is that upgrade process then being done back here at our locations here or at the remote site?
Here.
Okay, that's what I guess. I thought I heard it was being done at the remote site.
Yes, that's for the testing.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Anything else on this issue?
Mr. Chair, would just like to thank Ms. Hargrove and Mr. Wisely for their effort. Thank you very much.
Commissioner White.
I do, before we leave this sheet, the high-level overview, I see one glaring omission, and that's the public education component of this. I've had numerous discussions with the administrator. I've been told that this is a whole of county, if you would, effort with media contacts, with social media, the printed media, a lot of different things. But I'd like to hear something about what we're going to do to educate the voters about what a vote center is and what changed and what they have to do to be able to vote without any restrictions or any changes to them, and the conveniences of it versus a precinct polling place.
Well, thank you for asking that question. Yes, this is actually missing a few things. The media plan is not there. The contingency plan is not there. So everything, it's not there. So we will get that to you. The media plan, we are meeting every week with communications and with the recorder's office and their communications officer to develop the plan to get the information out to voters. We're planning, of course, media, social media. We're planning to go out to different groups and different communities, especially the senior community, and speak to them, and any other group that we can get in front of and actually talk to them about vote centers and how it's going to work. Ideally, we would also have some opportunities for Mr. Hurley, where we could actually take the actual iPads out so the voters can actually see what they look like and how they would actually have to sign off on the actual iPad. So we are working on the media plan as we speak, and that's a weekly meeting, and it will continue through the election.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Mace.
Just one thing for our awesome rural constituents in District 3. Just a lot of folks out there do not use social media. And so, I would just like to keep that. And I have a sense that someone in my demographic, frankly, is going to have a lot, not obviously, but will most likely have a lot faster adoption period of this. Or, I just really worry about rural residents, either without connectivity, either through social media or ISP service, if we're going to do this Cradle Point thing, or education, reaching out solely and exclusively through social media. While that is an awesome tool, a lot of people still are reading the paper every day. So, thank you.
I'd just like to tell you there are those of us in not remote areas that don't use social media either.
Personally, Mr. Chair, I do not use social media often at all. So,
I have one last question for Mr. Wisely or Mr. Federico. Last month, we were discussing the ability of the e-poll books to read driver's licenses, and the subject of being able to read military IDs came up. It was an unknown at that point in time whether that was going to be available. Do you have an update on that?
On the military IDs, no, I don't. Do you? I need to see if they have a barcode on the back. If they do, they can probably add that to the list. The problem with military IDs is they do not have an address on them, so that cannot be your single source of identification. But if they have a barcode on, because we found through our testing that there's an old style QR code on some Arizona driver's license that it didn't interpret correctly, so we've corrected that so that it'll identify either an older license or the new ones that have a slightly different QR code. There are also the new voter IDs that the recorder's office has sent out. That barcode is on the list now as well. So if I can get a copy of a current military ID where I can scan the barcode and send it to them, or provide our vendor with that information, they can probably add it to the list. I can't commit them because I'm not them. But from what I understand, that should be an option available. But again, it cannot be the sole identification for the polls.
But I'm correct in assuming that if an individual doesn't have a state-issued ID card or a driver's license or something else that's acceptable means of identification, there's still a way for a human being to look at the identification they do have and hand enter that information into the e-poll book. Is that correct?
Correct. One of the things our old trainer used to suggest to the poll workers was if they come in with no ID, ask them if they drove there, because they can use their vehicle registration and proof of insurance as ID, and that can be manually entered into these iPads, that they've provided some form of ID and process them as a regular voter.
And I'm assuming that the purpose behind the driver's license is mostly speed and efficiency rather than anything else.
Correct. That pops their name up and you don't have to do a manual entry search.
Okay. Commissioner Preble.
I find it quite ironic that the HAVA grants that were meant to get us out of technology are now putting us back into technology where people are not going to trust the numbers. I think that's, you know, the HAVA grants were set up after the Bush v. Gore because the hanging chads. And so immediately Tucson and Pima County went away from punch cards on there, because we used to punch cards in the 80s. And so we went away from that because that was undecipherable sometimes. I think it's really ironic that this money is now putting us back into technology.
Commissioner White, did you have something? No? Ms. Hargrove.
I want to say that if any of the commissioners, if you want to partner with me on how to reach your community, I would greatly appreciate that. You know, I'm new to the community, so I need all the help that I can get. Any suggestions that you have, we will take them. So please contact me and let me know, and I'll be happy to work with you on that.
Commissioner Hurley.
Well, yeah, I would echo that. The reach of social media is highly overrated. I mean, I don't know the statistics. It's highly overrated, though. It's a bubble that is out there. People do too. And like District 3, I can tell you right now, like the East Side and District 4, people out there, most of them, they're just not that demographic, all right? So I'm concerned about that. I don't have an answer for it, though. Unfortunately, I don't, because we've gotten so segmented and partitioned out in our reach of communication, partly because of this stuff, though it's caused some issues that I don't have an answer for on that. But I have a question, again, back to Mr. Wisely, on talk about ID. You were talking about using registration and things like this. I thought legislation was just passed that tightened this requirements up for photo ID on elections, which would mean that what you talked about would go to a provisional ballot where they would have to cure that. Was that, did I misread something somewhere?
Unfortunately, we didn't get our legislative update for the meeting, so.
I thought that was passed a while back. I think it was. I can't remember the number. I'd have to look, but I thought we tightened all those up. Anyway.
I'll review what the ID requirements were.
I think that's one of the things we were hoping to hear from Mr. Rassi today.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay, agenda item 5E, or 5D, excuse me. Ms. Preble, Commissioner Preble.
That's okay. I left the country for a week, and when I came back, I found out that a vaccine had been invented. And I looked around and I questioned, we don't have a vaccine. I caught COVID from somebody who had gotten his flu shot and the booster shot. There is no legal vaccine for COVID. So why are we mandating something that doesn't even exist? I go across the country on an airplane without a mask.
Okay, I would like to interject something here. My impression is this is an action item.
Yes.
Would somebody care to move the item?
You want to read the resolution first? Or did I mean
Move the item. If you want to read the resolution, then we can, that's the discussion piece.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the correction. I would like to move that the commission enter a resolution to the Board of Supervisors, which I have submitted to the commission, to ban any and all mandates of masks or vaccine, proof of vaccine for COVID for any poll worker, volunteer, contractor who is in any way involved with the elections.
Thank you. And I have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Commissioner Tellman.
I'd like to know what the current county policy is.
We don't know.
I'm asking somebody who might know.
Okay.
Who knows who the county policy is?
Mr. Chair, yeah.
Required for entering this building.
I would presume, since there's more people in the room without a mask than there are with a mask, there's no requirement to enter a county building at this point in time.
The entry signs say recommended.
Commissioner Hurley.
If I may, this comes out of if you pay attention to the news, frankly, nobody knows what the potential policy is. Administrator Lesher has gone back and forth on this. The legislature passed legislation recently, Governor Ducey signed it, which bans the counties from imposing these mandates on their employees. That actually goes into legal effect 90 days, as you all know, after the end of the session, which probably is sometime in September. Administrator Lesher has been in the news, on the record, as favoring these mandates through the primary season. I don't know why it's gone. I don't believe the board has actually voted on it, but I believe it behooves the commission to get out in front of this in stating our position on this, hopefully help sway them to drop this nonsense, because it's going to restrict the availability of some of your poll worker pool of workers. There are a lot of people out there who want to work these polls who will not provide that information. So let's get out in front of it. Let's let our opinions be known, get on the record.
Can I say something, Brian?
Commissioner Atkins.
So I'm home today because I'm contact traced from someone who has COVID right now. And numbers are going up, and who knows what they're going to be when election season rolls around. So, but that being said, I know that this is such a contentious issue that I think it would still be wiser to let people make their own choice at this point. If they want to wear a mask, and if you don't.
Commissioner Mace.
Mr. Chair, I see Commissioner Huntley's perspective on this. If anyone on whatever side of the vaccine, if you have a policy that says we're banning vaccines or showing vaccine proof from workers, I can see how someone on one side of that spectrum is going to think with that lens, hey, they're trying to make sure that our type of poll workers are excluded, right? I think that maybe your concern that if you have a pool of poll workers who are of one mindset or another, and you come down with a policy on one side or another, you're going to absolutely exclude those workers. I'm trying to see that perspective. However, without knowing what the policy is, and we immediately jump in on one side or another, you're gonna isolate that other 50%. So I just don't know that. I think this is a solution without a problem yet, in my opinion.
The point here is that the legislature has spoken. The legislature has spoken. The reason that this doesn't go into effect in August is because of the 90-day window. So why are we back and forth? This kind of stuff. It's absolutely going to be state policy in the general election. Why are we playing around with it now?
Commissioner Preble.
And the fact of science is there is no vaccine.
It's not a fact.
That is a fact.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner White.
I apologize to the commission being ill-prepared to respond to this proposal. The first time I saw it was when I sat down in this chair this morning. I would be glad to go back to the administrator and ask if there is a current Pima County policy and what that policy is. But in the interim, we have Supervisor Christie is here, and there's a staff member from District 1 is here as well. Maybe they can inform us as to what the policy is, if there is one.
Supervisor Christie.
Good morning, Commissioners, Mr. Chair. The current policy that is in effect is that if you wish to become an employee of Pima County, part-time or full-time, you must be vaccinated or show proof of vaccination. The policy is in effect, and that would include a county employee who would be a poll worker. The county is paying for that poll worker. They become an employee. They do have a requirement that if you are going to be working for Pima County in any capacity, you do have to have either proof of vaccination or become vaccinated. So that is in effect now. At the last board meeting on Tuesday, the county health director as well as the administrator said there are going to be more evaluations of those policies that might include also incentives for vaccination as far as health insurance payments and the like that encompass this rather large umbrella of vaccination policies. But nonetheless, if you, at this time, want to work for Pima County in any capacity, you must be vaccinated or have proof of vaccination. Of course, as it was alluded to earlier, the clock is ticking away on the mandate from the legislature, but it obviously will not expire by the August 2nd primary. So, if you want to become a poll worker and work for Pima County, you need to be vaccinated or have proof of vaccination.
Thank you. Commissioner Tillman.
Yes, Commissioner, I would like to, or Supervisor, I would like to know what the effect of this commission stating an opposition would have. Would it mean that we're just recommending to the supervisors that you change the policy for election workers. How would you interpret this if you got this resolution?
I would interpret it as a very much needed action by this commission to be presented to the board. Whatever findings you come up with, I think it would be essential to any decision that the county would have vis-a-vis its future plans for vaccination. And also, it would also highlight the fact that the legislature has removed this mandate, but it has a time limit. So I think that it depends on what the commission comes to an agreement on, but I think it would be essential and very beneficial to have this commission render its opinion to the Board of Supervisors and the county administrator.
And would the effect be that the supervisors might decide our mandate is still in effect, but it doesn't apply to election workers?
I don't think they'll bifurcate it that way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Preble.
So the poll worker is a 1099 contractor and will be issued a 1099 at the end of the year. I don't think they're W-2 employees. But as you're stating, in any capacity that you work for Pima County, you would have to be vaccinated. I have my polio vaccine. I can show that card. I can certainly do that.
Supervisor Christie.
As an example, a summer lifeguard job, you must be vaccinated. And the Board of Supervisors could possibly bifurcate and make exceptions, but that's up in the air as well, so that's a possibility. But I mean, I'm showing you an example. Any kind of an employee, be it a lifeguard, be it someone in the library or whatever, the policy remains in effect for vaccination mandates.
Further discussion? Okay, roll call vote on this one. Commissioner Atkins. Wait a minute.
So
I jumped the gun a little bit, Commissioner Atkins. What we're voting on is be it resolved that Pima County Elections Integrity Commission opposes any and all requirements for mask mandates or proof of COVID-19 vaccines for any Pima County employee, contractor, or volunteer involved in performing any task relating to the conduct of elections in Pima County. That's the motion that's on the table and what we're voting on. Now, Commissioner Atkins.
I vote no.
Commissioner DeLarge is not here. Commissioner Mace.
Nay.
Commissioner Hurley.
Aye. Yes.
Commissioner Tellman.
No.
Commissioner White.
Aye.
Commissioner Kirshen.
Aye.
Commissioner Preble.
Yes.
And the chair votes no. And the motion is defeated. It's a 4-4 vote, so the motion is defeated for lack of a majority.
Mr. Chairman, I would request that the roll call vote be entered into the minutes for the public record.
Certainly should be. Next item on the agenda, observers for e-poll books and vote counters. Commissioner Hurley, I think we've beat that horse pretty much to death today already, but if you'd like to.
I don't know, can I find another club around here? I think you're right. I think we're pretty good on that one. I guess, Mike, what made one point concern here is, again, I'm always concerned about any connections to wireless systems. Amazon Web Services is not flawless. It has gone down, and it will go down at the most inopportune times.
Status of the updates to the security plan, I think that falls into the same category. Go, no-go for e-poll books. I think we've determined that we're past the no-go station. Backup plans for recommendations. Anything else you'd like to add, Commissioner Hurley?
Well, I think if you had a chance to look at the Brennan Center's recommendations, it actually, if you read it, actually it's fairly simple. They recommend duplicating the paper, the entire system, not just printers, not just having part, but actually having paper poll books there in case something happens. So it's interesting to see them do that. They basically said in order to be safe and secure and guarantee the elections flow, you've got to have a total, complete, 100% backup system, just like you would have at your precinct. That, I think, is, and their point is nobody's really doing it. And it's because it's cumbersome, as we talked about, it's cumbersome. And so it makes a case that, do you really know what we're doing out here, moving forward with technology, you know, and somewhere, someday, the network's going to go down, and people aren't going to be able to vote. I mean, it's like going into a convenience store, trying to buy a soda, and the computers aren't working. You can't do it. So computers go down.
Ms. Hargrove.
I do agree with that. The difficulty in having an actual paper poll book is because it's a vote center, and we would have to send the entire county to each vote center. However, I have spoken with ITD, and we are looking at actually placing a file, PDF, on an iPad or some type of device where it's just a PDF, it's not connected to anything. It will not change as they back up poll book in the actual vote center. And of course, we would have to then use the paper signature roster unless we could somehow fix this file where the voter could actually sign it. Not sure that can happen, but that is the actual backup plan, to have some type of poll book in the vote center in the event that the others do fail.
Actually, I thought about that, and I've got a couple of comments thinking through this, my system's hat on here. First of all, if you do that, if a person signed in poll place A, went down the road to another place, there's nothing. The beauty of having, I'll admit, the beauty of having a connection is if they go over here and sign in, now everybody knows they've signed in and they can't sign in somewhere else. If you're doing what you're talking about, they've signed in over here, now they go down there, down there, down there, and how do you marry up those systems in a PDF file to find where the first timestamp is or whatever, to say, first two things. One, this is the only ballot that counts. And two, you've broken the law and we want this person prosecuted.
Ms. Hargrove.
That's a great question, if I may answer.
Yes, ma'am.
Unfortunately, we would have to go to provisional ballots if we had to revert to that PDF file.
But you still have the timestamp problem.
Well, if the person actually votes in a vote center where the poll books are still up, they registered that vote. They put their ballot in the ballot box. The provisional ballot will not be counted until after Election Day, where the recorder then has the opportunity to verify that this person has already voted and then recommend not counting the provisional ballot.
So but they signed in on a PDF file. Okay. It's, you know, a PDF file. They didn't go into the main electronic poll book.
That's correct.
So now you've got PDF files around and it's an extreme example, but it could happen. They've got multiple PDF files they signed in. How do you reconcile those?
So it's actually the ballot itself that we would be concerned about, counting only one ballot for that person. So all of those provisional ballots that they end up casting, will end up in the recorder's office. And then they have to verify this ballot against the voter's record. And then they would see that the voter has already voted. And if this person actually has these 5 ballots, yes, they will definitely should be prosecuted.
Anything else? I'm going to make an assumption, Ms. Hargrove, that our next meeting, primarily the only agenda item that I would presume seeing on there is demonstration testing and playing with this system to make sure that it works correctly. You have mentioned being in a bigger location so that it would accommodate more people. Do you have any idea of what that bigger location might be at this point in time?
We're recommending Abrams. We're
Yes.
recommending Abrams. We did consider Public Works and some other facilities down here, but then we thought about the parking, and then it wouldn't be as convenient for voters to park if they had to come down here.
Okay, so we'll be in Abrams next month as opposed to down here. Commissioner Preble?
I think Barbara Tellman, Commissioner Tellman, also wanted to know about staffing, and I think that she wanted that on the agenda for next meeting.
Okay.
And I'd also like a final update on the legislature, hoping that it's done by then.
That will depend on our ability to get a hold of Mr. Rassi.
Can you submit something in writing of what actually, mostly I want to know what actually passed.
We'll see what we can get done. Mr. Federico, you understand what's being requested of you?
Yes.
Commissioner White?
I think the horse has already gone from the stable, but I apologize for not being here for the acceptance of the minutes. There was an item on there about a City of Tucson election that had my name associated with it, but I had no involvement in that item, so I don't know how that was resolved in the review of the minutes, but I'd like to have my name removed from that particular item. Thank you.
I believe I was the one who reported on that.
Anything else? Hearing nothing, this meeting of the Pima County Election Integrity Commission stands adjourned.
Yeah, Mr. Federico. They didn't recognize us down the parking lot. They didn't recognize us down the parking deck. They ended up paying.
We're going to check you out.
Huh? No. They wouldn't let us in. They wouldn't let us in.
Well, it's you. Like $1 million, you can get into it. No, but really, where are we supposed to park? I always park under the
They wouldn't recognize us.
Tell me that's just some
I called David
No, it won't stand. No, we tried that. She told me.
Oh, no, Jay just doesn't and if it's only
Yes, okay. Just like some little shot.
home rule will make our own decisions.
all right. I mean, they said it could be good, so I'll talk to Rob and see.
So what am I?
Last time it was silly. You walked in. Okay, well.
Yeah.
No, try this one.
Well, thanks for your comment. You swayed me there because I had a couple of flat.
It was just, I talked to them about the fire office. So, they, their requirements are.
Yeah, because you don't work with Mark. You know Mark is. Yes. Well, in a county facility, they might try.
I think even on
Virginia.
You ready for the Tucson Summer?
I keep hearing about it, but let's see.
I'm running stuff off at
But it's when the monsoon's coming, good job.
Thank you again. And don't forget, I'm a guinea pig on the Board of Supervisors.
Please, can go back to your office. Okay, thank you. Yeah.